Hello everybody, I'm Peter O'Leary, and I'm so pleased to be with you here on Kalevala Day. I want to thank Kasha and Bob for inviting me to participate with you. I'm going to read to you two sections from my book-length poem, The Sampo, and I wanted to provide you some context for the things that I'm going to read. Ordinarily, when I read from this, I have to do a lot of contextualizing of the story itself. Happily, I feel that I don't need to do that with you. However, I do want to give you a sense of my own relationship to the material and how the poem came to be, which I suspect is something of interest to many of you. So I am I want to say third generation, but it actually may be fourth, depending on how those things are counted. So let's say a third or fourth generation Finnish American on my mother's side. So my mother's father was born in Hancock, Michigan. That's in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Ordinarily, again, I have to explain that to people. I have a feeling I probably don't need to explain to you that there's a legacy of Finnish immigration to that part of the United States. Her father was one of several siblings, and a few of them were actually born in Finland. He himself was born, as I said, in Michigan, and that means that my experience of Finnish Americanness is bound to the peculiarities of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, which, as in many people's experiences of their ancestry, means food culture. In my case, it's pasties, Upper Peninsula pasties, and which are meat pies that came over to Michigan by way of Cornish miners, taken up by the Finns. The Keweenaw Peninsula is rich in copper mines, and so the Finns were regular workers in those places, and they adopted this particularly delicious form of pastry as an everyday food. And my mom always made for us growing up the little tiny Finnish pancakes. Her father liked to make them in this sort of silver dollar shape, so that's another little element. But I never had been to Finland, nor knew any Finnish besides, family name connections to that. And in the summer of 2012, it was the summer of 2011, pardon me, my family and I went to Finland as part of a long trip we were taking in Europe, kind of a research artistic grant tour that we took. We went to Sweden, we went to Finland, and then we were in residence in Lower Austria for about a month that summer. So this was an ancestral homecoming for me, and for my family too, my sons. We were there in early July, so it was not long after midsummer. This meant that the sun was setting around 10:45, I think, and the sun would come up, 2:30 or 3 in the morning. It was an amazing time to experience Finland for the first time. And the germ of the poem happened when we went to visit the National Museum on one of the days that we were in Helsinki. And we walked in, there's a dome in the central hall, and the dome has these architectural pendentives, as they're called, and they create these sort of fluted triangular shapes that support the dome. On those pendentives are 4 legendary frescoes that were designed by Akseli Galen Kalila, and upon seeing those, they're in this beautiful stylized turn-of-the-century kind of Art Nouveau style. Upon seeing those, I had an experience which I've never had prior as a poet or otherwise, which is the entire poem flashed in my mind. I didn't know exactly what was going to be in the poem, but I had an almost instantaneous conviction that the entirety of the poem was there for me, and I just needed to bring it out. I needed to coax it out. The museum itself is filled with all of these national treasures, including things that are prehistoric. It was kind of a mind-bending place to explore, and upon leaving, I did 2 things. There's a cat at my feet if you see me looking down. One is that I bought a little knit cap which had the glyph of a caribou on it, a kind of primitive drawing of a caribou. And I basically wore that hat as often as I could for the next few years, certainly while I was composing this poem. And then I also bought 4 postcards that the museum shop was selling of the frescoes, and I keep them tucked into my copy of the Kalevala. And these became they were almost like tarot cards. They were the tiles, the magical tiles that I would lay out on my writing desk as I began to work with this material, and I would look at them constantly. So, I don't know Finnish, but I do know how to use a Finnish dictionary, which I began to do. I acquired a copy of the Kalevala in Finnish, this particularly handsome edition, which comes from the year 1963, but it's in a very stylized kind of Art Nouveau design. And then I picked up an excellent Finnish English dictionary, which was published in 1916 in Hancock, Michigan, which is, as I said, the town where my grandfather was born. And then I was also using translations of the Kalevala to read, and I was especially making use of W.F. Kirby's translation of the Kalevala, which appeared in 2 volumes in the Everyman's Library. And this is also from around the same time, which is to say probably 1907 is when these translations first appeared. And they're excellent, and I love to read these books. As you all know, again, something that I ordinarily have to explain, the rhythm of the Kalevala is what's called trochaic tetrameter in English. It's an extremely compelling rhythm. Elias Lönnrot was deeply beholden to Goethe's Faust, parts 1 and 2, and the second part of Faust especially is written in this rhythm. So and Finnish naturally falls into that rhythm. So it's very compelling. And it works well in English. English has a very similar rhythmical quality, which is why I think this translation by Kirby works so well. It's also the reason why Henry Wadsworth Longfellow famously translated, or not translated, but channeled the Kalevala into American English in the Song of Hiawatha. I did not want to duplicate that in my version. Instead, I gave myself what might seem like an unusual restriction, which is I decided I wanted to write a poem in which the images flashed one after the other in sequence, and as a way of emphasizing the images, I decided I would restrict the use of verbs in the version that I was making, to the point that I don't use them really at all, with an important qualification, which is that I do use participial phrases. So these are phrases like, instead of saying Väinämöinen is walking in the sunlight, I limit it to walking in the sunlight. So what's missing is the verb is, but what remains is the participial phrase, walking in the sunlight. So that's an important qualification. It doesn't mean, just saying that to emphasize that there are verbs present in the poem, but they're not acting in the way that verbs ordinarily do. I'm really interested in the image. In fact, I think of it as an imagist epic poem. I want to add one additional thing to you, which is, as I was working on the poem, it occurred to me that these images of the frescoes that Galen Kalila painted were working their way on me so powerfully because, in fact, I knew them, or I knew versions of them from long back in my childhood when, actually as a teenager, I was exposed to them initially in this series of books that Time Life published back in the 1980s, the Enchanted World series. This volume is called Wizards and Witches, and the opening section of the book is called Singers at the World's Dawn, and it includes these beautiful renderings from Galen Kalila. So they were already there in my imagination. Seeing them in Helsinki at the National Museum had the effect of awakening them for me, and connected the two elements of this project for me, well, three actually: my Finnish heritage and the mythical world of the Kalevala, that's one of them. My interest in something called imagism in terms of its place in 20th century American poetry, which has to do with those flashing images that I was describing. And then the third element is my love of fantasy literature, like Swords and Sorcery. I really did want to write a poem about a wizard, and with the Kalevala material, I was granted that. So, in the Sampo, my focus, unsurprisingly, is the Sampo itself. So what I want to read for you are two parts of the poem that have to do with the Sampo. First, I want to read to you the part in which Ilmarinen, the primeval smith, forges the Sampo up in the North Country, and then I want to read for you the part in which Väinämöinen and his band of thieves steal the Sampo from Louhi and begin to take it away from Pohjola. So I'll begin with the first part of my poem, the forging of the Sampo. So this comes from the first section of the book, which is called Forging the Sampo. And at this point, the maiden of Pohjola, whom Louhi, the sorceress of the north, has convinced to try to seduce and or promise to marry Ilmarinen, the primordial smith. She has essentially offered herself, and Ilmarinen, who was against his will, drawn up to the north in order to perform this task, because Väinämöinen, the wizard, is unable to do it himself. At this point, he's agreed that he'll do it. So this is the forging of the Sampo itself. The maiden speaking. The Sampo, forge it for us. And Ilmarinen, not pausing, I'll forge it the Sampo, its intricate interlocking lid, its image of the starry sphere, its mirror of the underworld channels, I'll hammer it. Form wholly wrought, but fangled and fine. These I'll want. A swan's wingtips, finely grooved, a barren cow's acrid milk, a grain of barley, a ew's newly sheared wool. Heaven's the first lid I ever forged, the dome of sky I hammered out from nothing. There's my skill. Where's my forge and where's my smithy? Where's my hammer, where my tongs, anvil, mallet, bellows? With these I'll forge, in the woodlands, forest allies guiding me by scent and aspect. And with that, setting off into the woods. Crimson flesh, fleecy remnants on the caps, pushing through the pine duff, leading Ilmarinen deeper into the trees, lucid-looking amanitas, sifts of light, bright red dottles, his attention expanded, sweet wandering, a day, then days. There, huge, a stone streaked with color, hematite, troop of amanitas in a circle around it, rhizomorphs, changing forms, profundities outside the body. Colossal wall of stone behind the streaked one, here, the smith, banking his fire for a whole day, building an oven, intense heat reflecting off the wall, dry, agonized branches of fir, snap of broken bone, the sound, a roar, feeding the blaze. The next day, building his forge, curious serfs assembling to watch a master working, great Ursus of his form, nimbleness of gesture, a movement like dancing. Ilmarinen, felled log for a level, to the bellows that he built there, endless midnight twilight of the midsummer, come upon him, cinders in radiating plumes. You there, you seven, work the bellows. Immense unruly heat in the scene, competing solar source of the fire, thrust beneath the forge, by the smith, his deft craft. 3 long summer days, the 7 serfs, pumping the bellows. 3 expansive summer evenings, stones, glowing beneath their feet, unremitting labor, epic time, and Ilmarinen forging. Intense immenseness of the fire, forge as self-manifestation, searching there in its flames. A bow, a boat, a heifer, a plow. One a day for 4 days revealed, grown from fire, each ill, wicked, evil. Bow of gold tipped in silver with arrow shafts of shining copper, boat whose prow is colored gold, oarlocks wrought from polished copper, heifer idol cast in chromy gold, great constellation spangling her forehead, golden corona encircling her horns, plow of shining gold with handles tipped in silver, each object an evil waster of plenty. Men the bow would slay, wars the boat would wage, milk of honey the heifer would spill, meadows the plow would thrash. One each day crushed, smashed, by Ilmarinen destroyed, urging the 7 serfs to pump the bellows harder, to the limit of their powers. Winds, in great thrashing roars, the eastern wind first unleashed, then the gusting western wind, tantrums of the southern winds, thermal furies from the ice caps' northern winds, 3 days blowing in succession, all the while the great billows pumping. Fire flashing on glass, cinders pluming up to the forge of heaven, smoke of the sky, fume of flame and wind, sign of Ilmarinen's making, unremitting movement of his ursine form. There, after 3 days, in the bottom of the furnace, the Sampo, forming like a pyromantic morel, in the ashes, its many-colored cap lustrous and waxy, fuse of force pushing it from flame into life, and Ilmarinen, flexing his fist on the shaft of his hammer, and with his tongs pulling the Sampo from the heart of the fire, shaping for the maiden this vivid form, its intricate interlocking lid, its image of the starry sphere, its mirror of the underworld channels, its forest of root systems, its agarical jewels, welding it, hammering it, heaping his cunning blows upon it. To the Sampo, the world converges. From the Sampo, an energy emerges whose radiolarian saprophytes nourish the earth they suture. How pleased, oh how pleased the gap-toothed hag of the north, who deftly hefts the massive Sampo, quickly hiding it away. In the arcanum of the copper mountain, 9 locking charms she chants to keep it safe. 9 fathoms deep she quests into the mountain's heart, where the Sampo's reef-like salamandrine roots begin their tapping. The first one, rooting deep in Mother Earth, another one, alongside rolling water, and a third one, cored into the home hill, and afterwards, Ilmarinen, to the Virgin, pointing, the Sampo, it's done, see? Its intricate interlocking lid, marry me. And the Virgin saying, who? Who, if I leave here next summer or the summer after that or 3 summers after that, who will listen for the cuckoo calling? Who will hear the mating warblers trilling in the open uplands? Who will flock the doves together with awaiting wishes? Who will gather all the cloudberries from their thorny thickets? Who will attend to the talents of the joybirds, moving extravagantly through the woods to the Copper Mountain summit, to the edges of these uplands? I'm not done here. Not done picking berries. Not done singing along the lake shores. Not done finding new meadows. Not done with summertime. Ilmarinen, dejected, immense Ursus of his form, his look downcast, wishing for home. Away from dreary Sariola, darkness homestead, witch-infested, too long drawn in summer's arctic sun, and the gap-toothed hag of the north country. Smith, are you sad? Feeding him summer beer, flat rye bread, warm from the oven, spread with egg butter. The boat she suddenly conjures, solid wood, copper paddle, gently lapping Bothnian waters. Rill patterns, from the wind she summoned, thrumming the surface, then setting him moving. Blue sea, cloudless glass of sky surrounding, a day, another, and a third, south at last, to his homestead. Wainamoinen, rune lord, wizard singer, waiting. Ilmarinen, brother. Smith, tell me, is it done? Did you forage in the forest? Did you forge anew the Sampo? Tell me. And Ilmarinen, moving to his smithy, not looking up, making ready, a new fire, but seeing in his mind's eye the Sampo, secretly enthroned in the core of the Copper Mountain, converging to it, the world, emerging from it, an undiminishing energy, nourishing the earth it sutures with its enormous roots, intricate interlocking lid, image of the starry sphere, mirror of underworld channels, agarical jewels. Yes, my twilight machine, yes, I made it, I forged it anew. And now I'm going to read to you from the beginning of the third and longest section of the poem, which is Stealing the Sampo. I'm going to read to you the passage in which Wainamoinen and his band of thieves steal the actual Sampo from Louhi up in Sariola. Wainamoinen, wizard singer and rune lord. Ilmarinen, primeval smith and Sampo forger. Lemminkainen, reckless adventurer, son of Lempi. oars and sails, skimming the waves' billowing textures, the lake's broad surface, its rich protean blues. Northward, to Poyola, dismal darkness homestead, dreary Sariola, the land where men are eaten, where women drown the heroes. Oaring northward, Ilmarinen, raw core of his strength, Lemminkainen, bursts of his younger energies, ancient Wainamoinen, sitting in the stern, trembling thunder rudder he holds, gusts of foam the bow cuts through, northward, through the turbid brash tossing waters, to havenless Poyola, terminus, the Sampo's mysterious source. Copper-edged quayside they rode toward, muscles worn from the long voyage. Evening silence they step into, quiet house ahead. Louhi's homestead. Louhi, gap-toothed hag of the north, squawking crane, Wainamoinen padding softly, his stealth the others mimic, groans of the porch under their shifting weight, and the huge door, its brittle hinges, beer he oils them with. Resourceful rune lord, remains they quickly quaff, remnant foam on their whiskers, sudden flare of matchlight, soft witch glow of the lamplight. Louhi, clearing her throat, heroes, what news? Her household, awakening to the early gloom. Wainamoinen, the Sampo, its intricately interlocking lid, its image of the starry sphere, men and women, speaking of nothing other. We've come to behold it. We've come to share it. Louhi, gap-toothed hag of Sariola, if two can't portion a grouse or three divide a squirrel, no way can people share the Sampo. Listen, do you hear? That's the Sampo. It grinds away under the copper mountain, locked, bound, to the underworld channels. Rejoice. I'm the Sampo's mistress. And Wainamoinen, lord of song, if you won't share the Sampo, then we'll take it from you. Louhi, crone of Poyola, dreariest shadow-locked Sariola, engorged with rage, arising, a gross spectre, hideous, summoning even deeper anger, calling all her youthful swordsmen, drawing their weapons, crossbows aimed, at Wainamoinen's head, who unslings his kantala, sitting quickly down, crossing his legs, dressed in grey felt, his hair and beard like fuming smoke from burning fresh pine boughs, tapping his dulcimer's horsehair strings gently, lullingly at first, and then with defter touches. What tunes! Like the breathing valves of an animal, like an unknown necessity, men obeying a wish to pause, women bursting out laughing, horses weeping, boys kneeling in wonder. At last, they're still, all of them, deep in slumber, lulled there. Wainamoinen, primeval crafty minstrel, from his pocket drawing forth sleep needles and fine thread to lash all their lids, slowly sewing them shut, cinching the sutures tight like a surgeon stitching open wounds, or a cook threading herbs into a salmon for roasting. One by one, all the warriors in the village, and all the people too, locked in lasting sleep. Then, flashing down to fetch the Sampo, to see its intricately interlocking lid, its image of the starry sphere, its mirror of the underworld channels, down within the copper mountain, infixed there by Louhi's 9 hexes, kept safe by 10 strong bars of iron. Then Wainamoinen, his aged nimble fingers with knuckles like flexing hinges, running them along the strings of his kantala, his Baltic psaltery, gently singing, at first, a clean melody, interfered with subtle discord, more commanding singing, a subtle persuasive droning, tremors of musical disruption the copper mountain absorbs, and the Sampo, enthroned at its core, feeling the tune like a rising up and a drawing down, and now Louhi's bars of iron, trembling, vibrating to the tune, all the securities loosening in the music, magic's lubrications. Ilmarinen, Lemminkainen, also known as Kaukomieli, the rest of the heroes they brought along, their pouches of clarified butter, crystal white as beeswax, smearing the butter on the bars and hinges, beer they lather on locks and doorknobs, and then Väinämöinen, lifting bolts from hinges noiselessly, deftly opening the inner chamber's doors, burgling silence spooking for the moment over them. Väinämöinen to Lemminkainen, you, son of Lempi, most illustrious, seize the Sampo, its intricate, interlocking lid. Lemminkainen, proud son of Kaleva's domain, hero of Ukko, boasting, the Sampo, I could move it with my toe. Lemminkainen, putting his queer shoulder to it, then on his knees, digging his feet into the mountain's earth, long, slippery, tractionless trenches, getting nowhere. The Sampo unbudged, its intricate interlocking lid fixed, unopened, its image of the starry sphere static but dynamic, throbbing with potential life, its roots in the mountain channels 9 fathoms deep, cool, silent gloom in the underworld, but above them, grazing on Pohjola's treeless tundra, a colossal bull, fattened but live, sinewed, his horns a fathom from tip to tip, his muzzle thick as half a fathom. From the Northland meadows they lead him, to the Copper Mountain, into the dark underworld chambers, whose massive roots of living rock they urge the bull to plow, to unearth the Sampo, to unleash it from its long threaded channels. What brash action! The bull's heroic braying, its taurian enormous intensities, and the tremoring lid of the Sampo, the ancient magic locking it to the under-earth, its incremental loosening from the magically fixed sockets. Väinämöinen then, and Ilmarinen, primeval smith, and Lemminkainen, lively comic son of Lempi, carrying the Sampo from within the Copper Mountain to the boat, the Sampo's long clotted roots dangling behind them, like a sorceress's wicked nest of hair, hefting it on board, its unwieldy size, unbalanced shiftings, below the decks, stowing the Sampo, its intricately interlocking lid slotted together, its image of the starry sphere, unmoving, absorbing shadows under deck, all of the thieves then, readying themselves as quickly and as quietly as they can, launching the ship, the waves, slapping at the hull, on the move, the feeling of release, the great rude morning sun. Ilmarinen, have you thought of where we'll take the Sampo? This Sariola is witch-infested, evil. Väinämöinen, there. We'll take it there, pointing, beyond the glowing dawn. This Sampo, with its saccharonymic ammonite lid, to the misty island, to its headland, and then we'll steal our way to the island's end, where the bizarre islanders never eat and never fight. There we'll keep it, safely forever, its roots seeking out new nourishing channels in a grove of sacred birch trees. Steering then through the waters in the lengthening sunlight, Väinämöinen, the feeling of health, of new life in the water's billows, in the sunlight's motions, chaining and unchaining flashing shapes on the water's surface, Ilmarinen, Lemminkainen, working the oars, great vast openness they pull sleekly into. A day, another, and a third, long stretches of silence and daylight. Lemminkainen, his mood, open and loose but wanting more. Väinämöinen, where's your song? Sing for us. And Väinämöinen, his mood, cautious and watchful. Too early. It's too early. for singing and rejoicing. But soon, soon, when we see our doors before us, when we hear them creaking open. But Lemminkainen, wanting song, and undaunted, stepping to the stern, taking there the highest perch and commencing to sing. At great volume and without skill, discord, expansive discord sounding across the auditorium of the waters, to 6 surrounding villages where the women imagine animal slaughter, and the men the winter devil's laughter. Near a 7th, a crane, antique skylord, altitude navigator, standing on a narrow natural bridge, above a still cluster of duckweed, iridescent green pocking waters, a vivid northward marshland. A lordly grey crane, standing there, counting the bones in its toes, magical actuary, from whose stomach Siberian shamans sew their talismanic pouches. Noble crane, sky's vicegerent, tall as a man, glaring soroid eye, flash of painted red, crowning a black-tipped head. Hearing Lemminkainen's singing, stretching its wings in sudden terror, lifting swiftly up, flying off, reaching a great height over Pohjola. To the Palearctic taiga, the crane's glaring, terrified call, its vivid clamor, its rough, guttural alarm. At top volume unceasing, throbbing over Louhi's sleeping warriors. Among the spellbound Seriolans, rousing them from 3 days' enchanted sleep, Louhi, awake in a panic, thrashing at empty air, looking for her bearings, finding them uncompassed, scampering in a hyperventilated rush to the copper mountain, to the hidden chamber, seeing its barriers smashed, seeing its locks destroyed, its massive doors flung open, leaning from broken hinges. The Sampo, is it gone? Did they steal it? Yes. Wishing you all a very happy Kalevala Day. Thanks very much for inviting me to participate.